Okay, so let's talk about payment plans. I have written a lot of critiques about the norms for payment plans in our women's empowerment, coaching, healing online industries because many of us have been trained by DIY online business schools and marketing programs that it is normal and routine and expected and proper to charge as much as 20 or 25% to people who want to access payment plans. And I have written that this is actually textbook injustice. Charging people who have less money more is textbook financial injustice. And every time I write this, I get a pushback from people who say, but it costs me money to administer payment plans and I need to recoup those costs, or there's a risk that I will not be able to collect on all of these payment plans. And those are actually legitimate issues. And here's how I want to talk them through and give us some ideas about how we can handle that. So if it costs extra money to administer payment plans, first of all, I'm not always sure that is the case, but let's say it is. If it costs extra money to run payment plans and to chase behind people if they default, then look at your historical numbers. What does it actually cost you every month in terms of labor, in terms of apps or software you have to use, in terms of collections? What does it actually cost? Look at those numbers and then compare them to the fee that you're charging. Is there a proportion there? So historically, it might be that it only costs you 4 to 8% of your gross that you're charging in payment plans to administer and collect on payment plans. And I'm just making that number up. But even if that's the case, it doesn't justify a 20 or 25% surcharge on the payment plan. There's a profit center being created there. And if it costs you money to run a payment plan, if there are fees built into that, if there are actual costs to your business, then why are we not baking that into our overhead? For example, I have a Stripe account. Stripe charges me fees to collect money. When someone buys from me, I don't then put a surcharge on it and says, what's going to cost me $61 in fees from Stripe to collect this amount of money from you. So you're going to pay this amount plus $60 in fees. And if I did, I think my customers would be irritated. I know that I'm irritated when I go to a corner store and they want to charge me $1.25 to use my credit card or debit card. I think that's the cost of doing business and should be baked into the prices. So if offering payment plans is part of you doing business, then we should be baking those costs into our overhead and all the prices in our business. That's what business do. So I just want us to take a look at that and say there are other options. I'm not asking you to not recoup actual costs. You're running a business, you should absolutely recoup costs. But what I'm actually asking us to do is look at our numbers. What does it actually cost? How do we recoup it? So sure, go ahead and charge 4% to access a payment fee plan because that's what it actually costs you to administer it. Again, I made that figure out, but if that's what your numbers say, then go ahead. Or take that 4% and build it into all of your prices as overhead because it's the cost of doing business. And then finally, I want to note that if we look at the benchmarks across businesses, the average business writes off 1.5% of their gross sales each year in uncollectible revenue. So again, if 1.5% of your sales are going to be uncollectible because they're on a payment plan and someone defaults, that doesn't justify a 20 to 25% surcharge on payment plans. And in fact, the actual industry numbers, according to research, are even smaller than that. Businesses have between 0.05% and 0.88% defaults in their businesses. And even if we expanded it to the absolute outliers in business, it could range from 0.5% to 4% a year in uncollectible debts. So again, that doesn't justify a 20 to 25% surcharge on a payment plan. So what I want us to do is look at your actual numbers. If there are costs associated with running payment plans, absolutely recoup them because that's what businesses do. But you have more than one strategy for recouping them, and none of them involve charging an extra 25% on a payment plan. And implicit in all of this is almost a bias against payment plans, as though payment plans are bad for our businesses. They're not. Recurring income is a great thing. It can take you from being on a revenue roller coaster to revenue stability, where you can predict your income every month. And when you are a new business and just starting out, getting to revenue stability is actually one of the number one hardest things to achieve. And it's a total game changer. We talk so much about scale, about going from zero to scale, but in between zero and in between scale is this magic thing called revenue stability that can change your life. So payment plans create revenue stability. They create monthly recurring revenue, and that is a game changer for business. So we shouldn't actually be afraid of payment plans. They can completely stabilize our businesses, create a lot of security from us from month to month. And when you offer payment plans, usually it increases your conversions by 20 to 25%. So there's net growth involved in offering payment plans to people. So I just want us to rethink the way we operate around payment plans. I'm not trying to say, here are the hard and fast rules, like thou shalt not. No, what I want to say is, here are some business literacy metrics. Here's what's really going on. Look at your actual numbers and then figure out how to recoup those costs that does not involve penalizing the people least able to pay.